So to continue our conversation of really a number of different issues. Number one, what will Democrats in the House do now that they've taken over control of the House of Representatives? Number two, in what other ways will this kind of circle of criminality or storm cloud of criminality drench Donald Trump with more rain? In all of these different ways, there has been the question of what is going to happen with the House Intelligence Committee investigation from the Republican era, which ended, number one, of course, run by Devin Nunes, who was running to Trump to tell him what they were working on, and number two, ended prematurely before even all of the relevant witnesses had been interviewed as far as what Democrats on that committee told us. What is going to happen in that committee with regard to investigating Donald Trump? You'll remember that on Tuesday night at his 1 week delayed State of the Union address, Donald Trump called for an end to investigations into him. Well, they're not ending. And in fact, the opposite is happening. There are new investigations starting into Donald Trump, including by the House Intelligence Committee. We've heard from the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, that a very, very significant new investigation is starting into Donald Trump's finances and into foreign influence on Donald Trump. Now, if you're hearing that and saying another Russia probe, it seems that there's so much more to look into beyond just the Russia-Trump stuff, and you would be absolutely and completely correct. This is a much broader investigation because we've learned that the foreign influence on Trump is not just Russia, but Saudi Arabia is increasingly a point of interest. There are other countries that are points of interest because we've learned that Donald Trump's financial crimes may go well beyond just money laundering for Russian oligarchs through New York City real estate. There's so much more to look into that the new House Intelligence Committee investigation is going to look into anything that is related to possible financial wrongdoing by Donald Trump and anything else that could be influencing the way that Donald Trump makes decisions as president of the United States. This could be Russians, Saudis, anybody else. And it's not just going to be the House Intelligence Committee. This is an investigation that is so massive that it is going to include other committees as well. So the good news here is that if the Mueller investigation were to end tomorrow with no more indictments, it's still not the end. Now, I don't think that that's likely. Molly McHugh, who we just spoke to, doesn't think that that's particularly likely. But even if Matthew Whitaker somehow came up with a way to end the Mueller probe tomorrow or whatever else took place that ended it, it still is not going to be the end because the House Intelligence Committee is just getting started. Donald Trump was asked about this new probe. He didn't really say anything about it other than attacking Adam Schiff. He said Adam Schiff, who runs the House Intel Committee now, said, quote, is a political hack trying to build a name for himself. Interpret that however you want. I was thinking how Trump ran on this talking point of draining the swamp. There is a way that Trump may actually succeed in draining the swamp, which he promised to do. It would be having so many people around him that are part of the swamp that committed criminal acts that they end up resigning in shame or in prison because of the investigations that have been triggered by the Trump presidency. That's the only way that Trump is actually going to drain the swamp. And an interesting question for me is whether Devin Nunes could be caught up in all of this. You'll remember he was the previous chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, which of course was transparently bogus to begin with. Nunes had been on Trump's transition team, and then he was put in charge of the House committee that was investigating wrongdoing by Donald Trump. So we knew from the beginning that that was not an investigation that was going to come up with anything substantive, and indeed it ended before all relevant witnesses could even be interviewed. He could potentially be pulled into this investigation at this point. And Trump's mistake in retrospect may end up being having won the election, because I don't think he expected to win from the beginning. I believe that he wanted to place a sort of respectable second or third in the Republican primary, make more money from his presence on reality shows, become a more in-demand and kind of well-known guy. And Trump made the brutal mistake of overestimating the intelligence of the voting public. He likely assumed they're never going to elect me. I'm not at risk of actually becoming president here. And then once he was in too deep, his ego, his well-known ego, didn't let him drop out of the election. And that's ultimately why we are in the middle of all of this. If you are someone operating on the fringes of the law, the way Donald Trump has been doing for so long, sort of the last thing you want is to end up president where everything that you're doing is going to end up under this degree of scrutiny. And if I think forward to possible documentaries about the Trump presidency, what happened Tuesday night, Trump using the State of the Union to call for an end to investigations into him, that may end up being the climax of some really interesting documentary at some point in the future.